My name is Melissa Hart. I'm 35, and I built my boutique fashion business from the ground up, starting with 5 racks of handmade clothes and a credit score that barely cracked the 600s. Last year, I finally turned a real profit, expanded to a second location, and had $120,000 sitting in my business account money earmarked for the next big step. We were at the lakehouse for our annual family reunion, something I usually look forward to. The smell of grilled corn, the sound of kids running barefoot across the dock, even the cheesy playlist my cousin insisted on blasting every summer, it was all comfort. I had just stepped away from the group to check my email when I opened my banking app more out of habit than necessity. At first, I thought the app had glitched. $0, 0 in checking, 0 in savings, 0 in business. I blinked, refreshed the screen, and stared as my heart started hammering in my chest. There was no mistake. Every single cent was gone. I don't know what sound I made, but it must have caught someone's attention because the next thing I heard was Luke, my brother-in-law, chuckling from across the room. He was holding a drink half reclined on the couch like he didn't have a care in the world. His voice cut through the air like a cold blade. "We needed it more than you. That's what he said. Just like that. Like it was funny. Like he'd borrowed a screwdriver, not stolen my entire future. I felt my face flush with a mix of rage and disbelief. My hand clenched tighter around my phone. I looked at him, then at my sister, who wouldn't meet my eyes. For 1 second, I couldn't move. Then I took a breath, stepped forward, and said the only thing that came to mind. "Then you won't mind what's coming next." And in that moment, I didn't know exactly what was coming. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I wasn't born into money or connections. My parents ran a small diner in a dusty Oregon town where every dollar was stretched and every appliance in the kitchen had at least 2 duct tape patches. From the time I could count tips, I was helping with receipts or prepping napkin rolls in the back room. When I turned 16, I started sketching outfits in the margins of my homework. Clothes became my language, my escape, my dream. I took every side job I could find saved, like my life depended on it, and after college, I launched my own boutique out of a rented garage with just enough money to buy fabric and pay the first month's rent. No business loans, no handouts, just long nights, silent tears, and one belief that never left me: I could build something real. I named it Heart and Thread. The first year, I barely scraped by. The second, I sold at craft fairs and online to whoever would listen. The third, a local lifestyle blogger wore one of my wrap dresses, and things finally started to turn. By year 5, I had a loyal customer base, a brick-and-mortar store, and a team of 4. Every piece of progress came from showing up even when everything said I shouldn't. Jenna was always different, more spontaneous, more trusting. The kind of girl who lit up a room but forgot her keys twice a week. We were close as kids, but adulthood widened the gap. While I was grinding 14-hour days, she was bouncing between jobs and posting brunch photos like they were resume builders. Then she met Luke. She said they'd met at a gallery event. Later, I found out it was a poker night hosted by a friend of a friend. He showed up to our first family dinner wearing a $1,000 jacket and talking about crypto like he invented it. He told me my store was cute. Not promising, not admirable, just cute. There was something about him that rubbed me the wrong way from day one. Too smooth, too polished. Like he'd watched 100 TED Talks on how to fake charm. Every time Jenna spoke, she glanced his way, like checking for permission. She laughed. Les got quiet around opinions she used to shout from rooftops. When I asked if everything was okay, she said I worried too much. Once I saw Luke get visibly annoyed because Jenna offered to split a bill. He leaned in and whispered something that made her shrink. Another time, I caught him watching me from across the room while I was entering payroll info on my laptop. Just watching, smiling like he already knew something I didn't. I tried to talk to her, gently at first, then more directly. She always defended him. Told me I didn't understand him, that he was under pressure, that I should trust her judgment. So I tried. I really tried. But deep down, I never trusted him. Not completely, not even a little. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled into the driveway of the lakehouse. It was the same sound I'd heard every July for 15 years, a sound that usually brought comfort. This time, it settled in my chest like a warning bell. The house looked exactly the same. White shutters sagging porch swing, Aunt Donna's faded flamingo yard art still guarding the front step. But something felt off, like the air was too still, or the light too sharp. Emma waved at me from the dock. Her sun hat tilted, her kids shrieking with laughter in the water behind her. I smiled and waved back, trying to shake the strange feeling. I grabbed my weekend bag and cooler and headed inside. Jenna was in the living room. She looked thinner than I remembered, her sundress expensive, but hanging wrong on her frame. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, but the smile didn't quite reach them. Before I could say anything, Luke walked in from the kitchen. He had on a Rolex that sparkled like it wanted an introduction. The last time I'd seen him, he was talking about refinancing. Now he was all designer shoes and cologne you could smell across the room. He grinned and raised his glass in a mock toast. Jenna reached for his arm as he pulled her close, the move more possessive than loving. She laughed too quickly at something he whispered, then caught my eye and looked away. I felt like I'd just walked into a play where everyone else knew their lines, but I'd missed the script. I headed down the hallway to drop my bags and caught a glimpse of Luke on his phone, speaking low, glancing my way. Jenna lingered in the doorway, fingers fidgeting with her necklace. That lakehouse had always been our safe place. This time, it felt like something was hiding in the walls. That night after dinner, I slipped away to my room to check on a few vendor emails. The house was buzzing with laughter and board games, but I needed a moment alone. When I walked in, something immediately felt off. My laptop wasn't where I left it. It was still on the desk, but turned at a different angle. The power cord had been moved from the left USB port to the right. Minor things most people wouldn't notice, but I'm meticulous with my equipment. I sat down, slowly opened the lid, and scanned my browser history. Everything looked normal. Maybe too normal. It was clean in a way that felt scrubbed, like someone had made a mistake and tried too hard to hide it. My stomach turned. A minute later, my phone buzzed with a security alert from my bank. A failed login attempt from an unrecognized device. I tapped into the security settings and saw that it happened within the last hour. 3 tries, all denied. I looked at the closed bedroom door. Everyone was still in the living room. I told myself it could have been a coincidence. That may be the app glitch, or I'd entered something wrong on another device, but I didn't believe that. Not really. I updated my password and turned on 2-factor authentication. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed. I told myself I was just being cautious, but deep down, it felt like something was watching me from inside the house. Before heading back to the group, I checked my suitcase. My tablet was where I left it, but I zipped it into the side pocket just in case. I paused in the hallway, listening to Luke's booming voice rise above the others. And in that quiet second, I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, exactly, but a readiness I hadn't known I'd need. It started with a phone call. I was halfway through a cup of coffee, still in my pajamas, standing at the kitchen counter, while everyone else filtered in for breakfast. Claire, my business partner, didn't waste time with small talk. She said the vendor payment had bounced. Not delayed, not flagged, flat out rejected. I stared out the window as her words sank in a slow chill crawling up my spine. I told her I'd check the account. Even as I opened the app, a voice in my head screamed that I already knew what I'd find. The login worked. The balance showed 0. Not just the business account, my checking, my savings. Every single one read the same. I tapped through them one by one, like somehow repetition would change reality. It didn't. The screen started to blur as my eyes welled. My mouth went dry. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, staring, heart racing, unable to move. Then I stepped away from the counter. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped my phone. I walked into the middle of the kitchen where most of the family had gathered, and I said it before I even understood I was speaking. The money's gone. I barely heard my own voice. I held up my phone, still showing the empty balance, and everyone stopped talking. Chairs scraped back, heads turned. My uncle stood up like he wasn't sure what he'd just heard. $120,000. I said it again, louder this time. Everything I saved, everything I built, gone. There was silence, thick and brittle, until my cousin rushed over and looked at my phone. She gasped. Jenna's face drained of color. Luke sat still, one hand curled around his coffee mug, watching me. I should have cried or screamed, but instead, something steadier settled over me. The panic was still there, humming beneath my skin, but another part of me was already starting to analyze. Who had access? Who had a motive? Who had the opportunity? And in that moment, with everyone staring, I felt it in my bones. Someone in that room had done it, and I was going to find out who. I turned to Luke, my voice steadier than I expected. You were in my room yesterday. My laptop was moved. My bank showed 3 failed login attempts from this location. You knew what you were doing. He didn't blink, just leaned back in his chair and tilted his head like I'd asked him what kind of wine he preferred. His lips curled into that smug, punchable smile he always wore when he thought he was smarter than everyone else. I asked if he had something to say, if he'd like to explain the timing, the access, the fact that the transfers were made from my IP address using a device already linked to my accounts. The room was silent, except for the hum of the old fridge. Jenna sat frozen, staring at her lap hands clenched so tight her knuckles were white. My aunt looked between us, eyes wide, but didn't say a word. My uncle stood behind me tense, like he was waiting for a punch to land. Luke's answer came slowly, like he was savoring the moment. We needed it more than you. That's all he said, calm, casual, as if the words didn't carry the weight of a crime. My breath caught. For a second, no one moved. My stomach flipped. Then my voice came low but sharp. That money was my business, my staff, their families. You didn't just steal from me. You stole from every person who relies on me. Luke shrugged. People like you always bounce back. It was just sitting there. We needed it more. His voice didn't even carry regret, only arrogance. I looked at Jenna. She still hadn't spoken. Her eyes were glassy jaw trembling, but she didn't look surprised. She looked ashamed and afraid. I turned back to Luke. You don't look nervous, I said. You don't even look worried. Why? Because you think no one will believe me? Because you think I won't do anything? He leaned forward, voice low. You won't call the cops. You won't drag your sister through that. You're not that cold. I met his stare. Then you don't know me at all. The moment held like a live wire, and in that charge I knew. I was done protecting anyone who protected him. The knock was sharp, not the kind that asked politely to be let in. It was the kind that made everyone in the room freeze mid-breath. Before anyone could react, the front door swung open. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, followed by a woman in a dark blazer who moved like she owned the space. Her badge was already out, her eyes locked on mine. Melissa Hart. Her voice was clipped, but calm. I nodded, pulse hammering in my ears. She introduced herself as Detective Alston, Financial Crimes Division. She said my bank had flagged multiple high-risk transfers and linked them to a fraud pattern they'd been tracking for weeks. I blinked, trying to process her words. She continued explaining that my bank's alert system had triggered an automatic law enforcement notification when large sums moved between linked accounts overnight. She asked if we could speak in private, but by then everyone had crowded into the living room. Luke stood still, trying to look relaxed, but his hand twitched against his thigh. His eyes darted between the officers, then to me. His smile was gone. This is a misunderstanding, he said, tone lighter than his face. A family matter. We're handling it. But the detective didn't even glance at him. Her attention stayed on me as she said the accounts had already been flagged and temporarily frozen. Luke took a step forward, but one of the officers shifted subtly to block him. The power dynamic in the room flipped in an instant. His confidence cracked. I asked if they needed evidence. She said they'd already received initial data from my bank and were hoping I could verify some of the transactions. I nodded again, still feeling like I was watching it all from outside myself. And just like that, the storm I'd felt building since yesterday finally broke. Luke's voice rose, pitching into defense. He asked why the police were even involved. He said I was blowing things out of proportion, but no one listened. Not this time. Not anymore. Jenna hadn't said a word since the police arrived. She stood in the corner, arms folded tight across her chest, her face pale and unreadable. But when Detective Alston asked if anyone else might have information, something in her cracked. She looked at me, her eyes filled with shame, and something deeper. Fear. Her voice was small at first, like she was afraid to use it. She said Luke had been controlling her for years, slowly isolating her, convincing her she was nothing without him. She admitted he'd drained her accounts too. Used her name to open credit cards, took out loans, but she never saw a dime of them. When she tried to leave, he threatened to ruin her to show people videos, things she said he made her do. She said he told her no one would believe her over him. The room went still. I saw my uncle's jaw clench my aunt's hand, reach toward Jenna, like she might collapse. Emma stepped forward and placed a hand on her back. Jenna kept talking like the words had been waiting years to be free. She said she knew about the money, not at first, but later. He made her help watch for my passwords, stall me at dinner, and act like everything was fine. She cried as she spoke, shaking but didn't stop. Every word cut deeper than the last. Before anyone could respond, there was another knock at the door. This one is slower, deliberate. 2 men in suits entered, flashing federal badges. They said they were with the FBI's cybercrimes unit and had been investigating a multi-state identity theft ring. Luke's name had surfaced weeks ago. My bank's alert connected the dots. They asked for access to devices to any statements or evidence. I handed them my phone. Jenna pointed to Luke's bag. One agent opened it and pulled out a folder filled with printed bank statements, social security numbers, and account screenshots. Names that weren't his. Documents that didn't belong. Luke tried to speak, but his voice caught. The officer read him his rights. And in that moment, I didn't just see a thief or a manipulator. I saw a coward unraveling as the lies collapsed around him. And I saw my sister finally stepping out of the shadow. Jenna moved into my guest room the week after Luke was taken into custody. She arrived with 2 duffel bags, a stack of unopened mail, and a silence that said more than words ever could. I didn't ask questions that first night. I just made tea and let her sleep. My business took a hit, but not a fatal one. Vendors were patient. My staff stepped up. Claire and I cut every non-essential expense and poured everything into keeping the doors open. Slowly, we began to recover. Family showed up in ways I didn't expect. My cousin offered bookkeeping help. Aunt Donna brought groceries every Sunday. People I hadn't spoken to in years reached out not for gossip, but with kindness and quiet support. 3 weeks later, Jenna and I drove to the cemetery. It was overcast, the kind of day where the wind carries more than cold. We stood at our parents' headstone in silence, hands tucked into our coats, the grass still wet beneath our boots. Jenna spoke first. She apologized not just for what happened, but for letting it go on so long. I told her none of it was her fault, that she didn't owe anyone an apology for surviving. We stood there until our fingers went numb. On the ride back, we didn't talk much, but the silence between us felt different, not heavy, not painful, just honest, like a space where something stronger could start to grow. At home, she made dinner while I checked emails. I watched her move around the kitchen with more ease than I'd seen in years. She even laughed at something dumb I said, and for the first time in weeks it didn't sound hollow. The chaos had passed. The damage was still real, but so was the recovery. We weren't healed, not completely, but we were no longer broken. We were just beginning, again, and that was enough. Family surprised me in the best way. Not the kind that shows up only for holidays or sends sympathy texts. The kind that quietly rearranges their life to make space for your pain. Emma started inviting Jenna to her book club, even though she hadn't read a novel in years. My uncle offered to help her with job applications, brushing off her apologies like they were silly. Aunt Donna taught her how to make that pie she used to love as a kid, claiming the crust was therapy. Little by little, those gestures pulled her back to herself. Not all at once, not perfectly, but in ways that mattered, like the day she picked up groceries on her own, or the night she helped my niece with a school project and didn't retreat halfway through. We started hosting family dinners again, something we hadn't done in a long time. Everyone brought a dish. The table overflowed. There were stories from childhood, inside jokes that resurfaced laughter that filled corners of the house I thought had forgotten sound. One night, Jenna sat beside me and whispered that she hadn't felt this safe in years. I didn't say anything. I just held her hand under the table and let that moment live. We talked a lot about what family really means. It's not about shared blood, but shared safety. People who show up, who doesn't flinch at the mess, who stands between you and the storm without asking why it's raining. Watching her rebuild with their help reminded me that healing doesn't always come from fixing what's broken. Sometimes it comes from finding something better to stand on, something stronger, something human. We didn't erase the past. We didn't pretend it never happened. But we filled it with something else. Laughter, care, a sense of home that was never about walls or furniture, but the people who refused to let you fall. That's what family is. That's what saved her. 6 months later, everything looked different. Jenna started a support group for women who had survived financial abuse. The meetings were small at first, held in the back room of a local library. But word spread, and chairs began filling up faster than she expected. She didn't just tell her story. She listened. She helped others find words for things they'd buried. She gave them a space that felt like safety, not shame. Meanwhile, my business didn't just recover. It grew. Claire and I opened a second location downtown. Sales were steady, clients came back, and every day felt like proof that what was stolen from me hadn't broken me. It had sharpened my focus. Family gatherings felt warmer now. No more walking on eggshells. No more waiting for something to go wrong. Just potlucks and messy games and laughter that came easily. Jenna brought cookies to Thanksgiving, real homemade ones, not store-bought. She laughed when the first batch burned. We all did. I looked around that table and saw not just survivors, but a circle of people who had chosen each other again. At Christmas, she stood beside me as I raised a glass. I didn't say much, just a simple toast, to boundaries that kept us safe, and to the bridges that brought us back. We clinked glasses, nothing dramatic, just a quiet moment of peace, and in that silence I felt it, that deep, steady hum of something whole. Life didn't go back to what it was. It went forward into something better. A chapter we wrote for ourselves. One built on trust, truth, and the kind of love that never asks you to shrink, only to stand.